Perfect. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, welcome to the SocialCode. For those of you who've been here, welcome back. It's great to see a bunch of familiar faces and to get things going again. I will sort of take some time to introduce myself, introduce the speakers. We do have a little bit of an announcement for tonight as well, which I'm looking forward to. And then we will take things forward from there. So for those of you who have not met me before, I'll cover that in a second, but I think the most important thing was I just wanted to cover off the ethos of why we run this event and to get things sorted on that front. So mainly this event is about three key principles. The first of which is sharing knowledge. We're quite keen on being an inclusive event, no matter sort of what your level of experience within the world of software development is. But we're also quite keen to create an area where people can come to share their knowledge on concepts, topics, areas of interest, whatever it is. So if you do have any interest going forward in getting involved in something like this, please do just let me know and we can take things from there. Our next thing is we really do encourage feedback and we encourage people to be a part of the community. By all means, please do use the chat feature for the evening. It's actively encouraged and, it's great to see people networking and finding connections from there. And that's something that we've been really big on with our sense of that going forward. And like I said, being a community, the SocialCode is so much more than just a few talks of an evening. For those of you who've been with us for a while, you'll know that there's a great community and a great network of people who are involved with this event. And please do feel free to stick around at the end because we do normally end up having a natter from anywhere between half an hour and 6 hours at some of them, depending on how late people can start work the next morning. So quickly, just to introduce myself, my name's Ross Townsend. I'm a senior .NET consultant here at Oscar. I specifically cover the Northwest. I've been running dev-related meetups for 3 years now. Time does really fly. It's been 3 years since I held my first event actually this week. I'm also studying computer science part-time whilst I'm working full-time. But if you do want to connect with me on any of the social media sites, feel free to drop me a follow, a connection, whatever, and you can keep up to date with everything for the SocialCode as well as via the meetup group as well. I probably have chosen a better photo of myself at a higher grade of quality, but it'll do. So speakers for tonight, I'll give them a chance to give you a quick wave here. We've got Lee Englestone, who's going to be kicking us off for the evening. So Lee is there, I can see him waving. Lee is the full stack manager at Avanade and is a Microsoft MVP. If you're interested in anything .NET, I would highly recommend dropping Lee a follow on Twitter because he does quite a lot of very interesting stuff. Lee, I'll let you cover off your social links if you'd like to share them at some point this evening. But Lee's topic is analyzing faces with or without code using, I believe it's augmented reality that you're using for that, Lee?
Only a little bit. We're going to use augmented reality just a tiny bit to do it, but we're going to do it with and without code.
Brilliant. No, looking forward to it. Our next speaker, Adam, I apologize because marketing have done this and they've spelled your name wrong. I've just clocked that. I should definitely throw on. Adam is the head of architecture over at Insight Investment, and there's a topic. The topic of the evening is all around enjoying what you do and finding fulfillment in your career as a developer and taking things from there. And I'm hoping that he will also give us some advice on also building a really cool Lego collection like the one that's behind him. And we can take that forward from there. And our last speaker of the evening will be joining us slightly later on. We've got John Peden, who is joining us. He's had a little bit of a childcare emergency, which is the only reason why he's not here at this exact moment in time. But he will be joining us in about 40 minutes or so to take things forward. And John's topic is, well, the mistakes that he's made as a contract developer and how he's grown from them. It's all about embracing that failure isn't sort of a dirty word or a topic that is a bad thing, and it's all about growing from your mistakes and progressing going forward. So really excited for that. We do have a big announcement for the evening. It's something that we have discussed at length with our membership, and I have wanted to cover off. So as of next month, we're going hybrid. So those of you who've been involved in meetups that I've run previously prior to COVID will know that I hosted events once a month in Manchester. I appreciate that not everybody is keen to get back, or maybe can't get to Manchester as well. For anyone who that is the case for, absolutely nothing will change. We'll still be hosting the events via Zoom. You might see me standing up in front of a microphone, but literally everything else will look the exact same going forward. We will continue streaming them. We'll continue having the interactive Q&A. The idea is that we can create the best of both worlds, because I know that I've had a fair few people who are involved in this group telling me they would love to get back in play. Lee asked if drinks are on me in the chat. Fortunately, actually, Oscar have been very generous, and they're going to give us use of both their office and bar for the event, and pay for the bar tab afterwards. So yes, drinks are on my boss effectively, but yes, drinks will be free for anyone who does want to come along for the evening. And just like any good old-fashioned in-person meal, we will have pizza as well, I promise. But yeah, the idea is that by having the hybrid event, we can create that environment where those of you who do want to come along, socialize in person, get to network with new people, can do so. But at the same time, there's no pressure on anyone. If you feel comfortable remaining at home, or you can't make it to Manchester for whatever reason, you will still get the full experience of a meetup. As I mentioned at the bottom of this slide here, our first hybrid event back is planned for the end of September. Please do watch this space. I will get the announcement up for that over the next few days with regards to kind of the details. I have got one speaker slot that has become available for that evening. So if you would like to get involved, please do just drop me a message. The chat feature is open to personal messaging, and then go from there. But looking forward to it. Yeah, Tony, I agree. I've just seen in the chat. Please do feel free to buy me a drink at any point in the evening if you would like to. Something that I do want to emphasize is that this hybrid event is all going to be done in line with government COVID regulations. If the restrictions change for whatever reason, we will go back to doing an online event. Our priority is everyone's safety, and that's first and foremost above everything else. We're not willing to take any risks on that front. It's all about ensuring that people can have a good time, but a safe time. Before I hand over to Lee, who's going to be our first speaker this evening, I just want to confirm we do have a couple of giveaways for the evening. We have got one Udemy and Pluralsight giveaway, but we've also got a number of lovely laptop bags to give away. I'll give those away in between each of the talks and go from there. But with regards to this, I won't take too much more of your time. I'm going to hand over now to Lee, who I know I've been excited for this talk because I remember just how well your talk went over last time. So I'm keen to take it forward from there. But thank you again to everyone for coming. I'll stop sharing my screen now and stop doing everyone's heading. Cheers. Lee, are you able to share your screen now, or have I not enabled that yet?
Let's have a look, shall we? It helps if I'm off mute, which I am. So let's see.
I just wanted to say hello to Helen's cat.
That wasn't me.
No, I'll set everyone. I'll set everyone to ask to unmute. There we go.
So I can share screen. Which screen it's going to share is a completely different question. I'm hoping.
Always the question.
Right. Yeah. Give me a second. If I hit this button, how does that look, Ross? Does that look?
Yeah,
okay?
That looks perfect.
Terrific. Right, my notes are down here, so it's fantastic. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming to the talk, and thanks Ross for the introduction. I've not given this talk before, so this is like the premiere of the talks. If you've got any feedback afterwards of how it could be better, please do feed it back. It's something I find quite interesting. Hopefully you will too. And if you're not technical, don't worry. We're going to talk about some of the non-technical ways of analyzing faces as well, some of maybe the more technical ways. So here we go. My clicker's working, that is a good start. So a little bit about me. As Ross said, my name is Lee Englestone. I'm a Microsoft MVP in developer technologies. I work for a company called Avanade, who are a global IT consultancy company, who you've probably never heard of us, although we're like 40,000 people across the world. We specialize in Microsoft technologies. We're actually formed by Microsoft and Accenture, I think 10 years ago. So if you're a sort of a cloud specialist or a .NET person and you're looking for your new role, come and speak to me if you want. Stealing your thunder there a bit, Ross, sorry about that. As I said, I have an interest in non-verbal communication, which is why I'm doing a bit of talk on analyzing faces. And I'm on GitHub, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube on Lee Englestone. If you want to follow me, as Ross said, I've covered a lot of things, mainly .NET, but I sometimes venture into augmented reality and machine learning and artificial intelligence and that sort of thing. I've also got a book which I wrote on augmented reality for .NET developers. So if you want a bit of bedtime reading, that is available in Amazon if you're interested. There is another Lee Englestone, as unusual a name it is, there is another Lee Englestone. But if you do Google for this Lee Englestone and you find references to stock car racing or something that looks quite dangerous, that's not me. This is a different Lee Englestone who I've yet to meet, but that's not me. Okay, so this talk I've split into two parts. The first part, we're going to look at facial expressions in general and talk about emotions and how we can infer emotions from our facial expressions most of the time. We're going to talk about how universal those facial expressions are when we're expressing emotion, and we're also going to look at an imperial way of measuring different facial expressions called the facial action coding system. And then in part two, we're going to look at how we analyze faces using software, using the Azure Cognitive Services Face API, so we can analyze an image of a face and it can tell us some information about it. And then I'm also going to use another piece of software to see how we can analyze faces in real time and infer things from it as well. So part one. So a bit of background. So you might have heard of someone called Charles Darwin. So back over 150 years ago, in his third major work after, let me get this right, The Origin of the Species and the Descent of Man, he wrote a book called The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. And he, along his travels around the world in his big boat, I think, noted that, and I'll just read this quote out, the young and the old of widely different races, both men and women and animals, express the same state of mind by the same movement. So he found in his travels, wherever he went in the world, people expressed the same emotions using the same facial features. And he also found similarities in not just people, but animals as well. So why are faces important? Well, our faces, our brains have got built-in facial detection. There's a very basic part of the brain that is all geared towards it. This is why we see faces in everyday objects. This is a phenomenon called, I think, pareidolia, which sounds like a plant in my garden, but it means that we can see something and think that it looks like a face, even though it might just be two or three different holes. And not only that, we can look at these faces on the screen and think, well, that cup of coffee looks happy, or that mop looks a bit grumpy, or that typewriter, I think, looks a bit angry. So yeah, our brains are hardwired to detect faces. And why is that? Well, early human brains, are all about survival. So we needed to be able to identify, is the person who's approaching us, are they a friend or foe? Are they a member of our tribe who we recognize? Or is it a stranger from a warring tribe who could pose danger to us? So it's very important in our survival to be able to recognize faces and determine if that's friend or foe. Then in modern day, the ability to identify faces and look at faces and try and infer how that person's feeling. If we're speaking to them, are they actually listening to us? Are they happy? Is it making them angry? This is quite important because nonverbal communication accounts for up to 70% of human communication. Verbal communication only accounts for a very small percentage of that. And in modern day, it's much more important that we use empathy and things like active listening to be able to communicate with other people. So it's a lot more important to have sort of emotional intelligence and a high EQ compared to IQ these days. So I guess what I'm getting at is in early days, ability to recognize faces was key to our survival, and in these days it's more key towards our success. In fact, empathy is very important especially in things like leadership. Right, okay, I've got to admit my interest in nonverbal communication really came about from a TV series on Netflix, which you may or may not have seen. If you've not seen it, I recommend you go watch it. It's really good. It's very binge-worthy. It's an American TV crime drama called Lie to Me, and it stars a British actor called Tim Roth, who plays a doctor who solves crime along with his colleagues using applied psychology, and he'll interview witnesses and say they're lying or telling the truth and things like that. Now this character is actually loosely based on a real person called Dr. Paul Ekman, who did studies about facial expressions and emotion and popularized some things called micro-expressions, which we're going to talk about later. Dr. Paul Ekman actually went on to become an advisor to the TV series. So you can go and look at online at all the different episodes from Lie to Me, and he's got like a commentary of the science behind some of the things that's going on. So go watch that, it's pretty good. I'm just going to play a little clip from that TV series because I think it's pretty appropriate, if I can. Hopefully this comes through.
We've got no audio on that, Lee.
Okay. What he's trying to get across is that different people all sort of, let me just pause that. Yeah, sorry about that. I had no idea you wouldn't get audio. What he was trying to get across was that it doesn't matter who you are. The people generally express how they're feeling and their emotions in exactly the same way. So that's what we're going to talk about next. It's a good segue. The 7 universal emotion facial expressions, and a quick test just to see if you can recognize them. This is kind of like a non-interactive test, and sorry for the large images of my face, but at home, see if you can guess what sort of emotion that I'm feeling right here. If you guessed anger, you are right. These are the 7 universal emotions for everyone, remember. This one here is contempt. This is the only asymmetrical sort of facial expression for emotion. Another one here, very similar, but disgust. And we've got one here. Best guess, that one is fear. Not many of these left, don't worry. And we've got happiness, probably the easiest one to recognize. Another one, probably again quite easy to recognize. Sadness. And I think the last one, if I've counted right, is surprise. So these are the 7 universal emotions that could be inferred from facial expressions. So like I said, it doesn't matter where you're from around the world, we all express these sort of these emotions in exactly the same way. Okay, that's I was going to delete that slide, but I forgot. Apologies. So then in the 60s and 70s, what they did was they developed an empirical way of mapping different parts of the face moving. So they can track facial expressions, and we're going to look at this next. And what they found is that the different ways that the face moved, the different combinations of them, they could infer different emotions. The actual facial action coding system is actually useful for animators or riggers as well. So if you're animating the newest Pixar film or something like that, it's very useful to know which way the faces should move if you want to say this character's happy, sad, contemptful or something like that. And it's very useful for law enforcement, for sort of deception detection, things like that. So there's about 30 different action units in the facial action coding system. Each have got a name, and each sort of relate to a particular muscle. And if with each of those action units, there's also an intensity scoring, so you can say, okay, the lip was stretched very a little bit, or the dimples there was a big dimple movement. So these are I think most of the muscles that the facial action coding system relates to. So then if we combine them, as I said, we can infer the emotions. So this is sort of like science, I'm not just making this up. We can say that happiness is usually a combination of the action unit 6 and 12, Fear is, it's got about 6 different movements of the face that all come together to express fear. And obviously our brains do this translation for us. We don't look at someone who's happy and say, oh, their cheeks have gone up and the lips of the corner of the lips have gone up. That means they're happy. Our brains do this for us, which we touched on earlier. So if we look at happiness, that's actually unit 6 and 12, which is the sort of cheek raiser. I'm not even going to try and pronounce some of these muscles, the names of these muscles, and then lip corner puller. And if we look at something, oh, sorry, I was going to go on to the next one, but before I do that, a little word on spotting a fake smile and a real smile. A real smile, which is otherwise known as the Duchenne smile, you'll get not only big smile in the mouth, but you'll also get sort of tightness in the eyes as well. If you the fake smile, you won't get that tightness in the eyes quite so much. So if you ever want to spot a fake smile or a real smile, just look at the eyes, really, all in the eyes. And then anger is a combination of 4 different action units, this one. So brow lowerer, upper lid raiser, lid tightener, and lip tightener. And that's how we get anger. Where's my next slide? Oh, yeah. So then we can look at things called microexpression, which are very interesting. So these are movements of the face that are done unconsciously and they can last less than half a second. And these are great for things like deception detection. So we're just going to play this one again, because you might have spotted it if you miss it. So I'm going to do that again one more time. If you look close at the picture, they're actually flashing a microexpression. And in this case, it was deception. You have to record it and slow it down sometimes to spot it. If you spot someone flashing that sort of micro-expression, they're probably not your friend at the moment, contempt, not, they're probably not your friend at the moment because they're feeling a bit contemptful. So then I asked myself the question, well, could we detect these sort of micro-expressions with software? So we're going to look at that next when we now analyze the face with code. So first of all, we're going to look at how we can analyze the face using something called Azure Cognitive Services Face API, which is just a fancy way of just saying, I'm going to send up an image to the cloud of my face, and then that's going to use clever things like artificial intelligence and machine learning that have been pre-built, and it's going to tell me some information about that face. Now, Azure can tell me things like, have they got hair? What color hair of it is it? What color of eyes have they got? Are they wearing glasses? Have they got a beard? That sort of thing. It can also infer, is it male or female? And it can even infer roughly the age. I find it guesses the age a little bit on the high side. So if you ever want to feel bad about yourself, upload an image and it'll tell you it thinks you're a couple of years older than you probably are. It can also infer emotions. And interestingly, it scores the same emotions that we've already looked at on these universal emotions: anger, contempt, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. It also throws in neutral as well. And it says on a score of 0 to 1, how neutral is that face, or how much is it confident that this face is displaying anger and contempt and disgust. And it's not, these aren't mutually exclusive. You could be 80% contempt and 10% anger and 10% disgust as well. So it can do that. It's quite clever. So then I decided to think about, well, this neutral stuff is quite interesting, because I used to play quite a bit of poker, not much these days. So what I wanted to do is take the poker faces of some very famous poker players and see how neutral those faces are. So not sure how familiar you are with the poker world, but when you're playing poker, it's very, very important to not give away how you're feeling. Because if you've got a very strong hand, you don't want to let your opponents know. And at the same time, you're trying to read your opponent's face if they're happy or sad with the hand that they've got. And these poker players, they could be spending upwards of $10,000 just to enter a tournament where they could win over $1 million. So it does pay to be able to hide your emotions and infer other people's emotions as well, or broadcast your intentions. So here we've got a Canadian poker player called Daniel Negreanu, and his neutrality of his face that I've uploaded is coming in at 92.4%. Another poker player here is Phil Hellmuth, who I think holds the highest number of world championships for the World Series of Poker. He's coming in at 94.3% neutral. And then the last face is of a very famous poker player called Phil Ivey, who is perhaps very famous for being incredibly inscrutable. He's coming in at 99.2% neutral, which is, I think, rather interesting. Now, I don't know if these poker players are actually training their poker faces against this kind of software, but it would make sense if they were doing that. So that's analyzing point-in-time images, uploading an image of a face and Azure saying what it thinks about that face is going on. Now, I've recently been playing around with Apple's Augmented Reality framework, and within that software is the ability to not only track up to 3 different faces in a scene, but also detect up to 50 different facial movements, brow raising, cheek raising, lips going down, and doing all that in real time. So just to be clear, it's not detecting emotions, it's detecting facial movements. And this is how Animojis, if you've got an iPhone and you have ever used Animojis and you move your face and smile or wink or stuff like that, you can translate these into these Animojis. It's the same software, it's using ARKit under the hood. But what we've talked about up until this point is we think we can translate these facial movements into emotions or infer emotions. That's what we're going to look at next. So I said that ARKit could track a great number of facial movements. These are the full list, and it can track these at a higher degree of accuracy and on a floating point scale, from anywhere from 0 to 1, and all in between. So it could be like 0.44444 mouth pucker or something like that. And again, you could be doing a combination of these. They're not mutually exclusive. And these are called blend shapes, by the way. So then the idea is to see, can we, in this software, detect which blend shapes or which parts of the face are moving, translate them into action units, and then combine, if we know that different action units combined can infer these universal emotions. So then that's what I tried doing next in this next slide. Hopefully, if the video plays, don't worry, there's no sound on this one, hopefully, just my face. And hopefully the video will play and not too laggy. So this is in real time, me moving different parts of my face. Then in the bottom, it's saying which of the action units are actually activated. And then on the left-hand side, I should have put that in loop, my apologies. Let's try that again. Then on the left-hand side, I've got the 7 universal emotions. So when I'm smiling, you can see that the relevant action units are firing, which then it's saying it's highlighting the happiness box. And then after that, I'm saying, well, can I flash this contempt as quickly as I can to mimic like a micro expression? And I think I'm flashing the contempt, which is just like a lip pull of the corner of the mouth, as quickly as I possibly can. And it's detecting contempt. So I think we're actually being able to in real time detect these micro expressions, which was the journey that brought me onto this bit, which was quite fun. You don't have to have this facial mesh on as well, which that's sort of optional for debugging purposes. It makes me look like someone out of Hellraiser when I do that, but it kind of shows you that it's tracking the different parts of the face. So if my clicker wants to respond again. Okay, so then in summary, we talked about the importance of faces, both in past and present. We explored different facial expressions. We talked about emotions and how we can infer those from facial expressions, and that these universal facial expressions of emotion, that there's only 7 of them and everyone's all the same, no matter where you come from, and across some animals as well. I'd love to test my app on like a gorilla or something, but I don't think they'd let me in a zoo to put it in front of a gorilla, and I don't think it would hold still. And then we analysed faces with code or with software. And then we did that for both point-in-time images and also real-time using ARKit. If you want to read more about this, I'd strongly recommend Joe Navarro's book called What Everybody Is Saying. He's an ex-FBI agent who was an expert in deception detection. His whole book talks about things, every part of the body, from which direction they're looking, what they're doing with their hands, if the hands go from here to here to here to underneath the desk, which way the feet are pointing, and whether they lean on a side or expose their neck as a point of vulnerability. It's fascinating. I suggest you give that a read. And then you've got Paul Ekman's book called Unmasking the Face. And Paul Ekman actually spent time, I forgot to mention earlier, I think in a jungle in New Guinea in his studies. And he found a tribe that had no contact with the Western civilization. And he found, again, that the emotions that they displayed when they were happy and sad, contemptful stuff like that, were exactly the same as everyone else in the world. And then I just thought I'd take the opportunity to plug my book, which does talk about the little bit of ARKit that we looked at to analyze the face in real time. And then that was it. That was my talk on analyzing faces with and without code. So thank you very much. Just a reminder that I'm on GitHub, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please do follow me. And then Ross, I don't know if your plan was to have any questions or moved on to the next speaker. I'll leave that to you.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Lee. Really enjoyed it. As always, feel free to pop your questions in the chat. We did have one that I believe you may or may not have answered, but I'll run it by anyway. Bal asked during the call, can you use a video feed and train your face with the API in real time-ish?
So is that not the stuff that I've written, but I know it would be a relatively simple thing to do. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I would say yes. Yeah.
Perfect. No, and feel free, everyone, to pop your questions in the chat for Lee, so that we can get them on. As always, I'll read them out just for the sake of the recording for anyone who hasn't been able to join us this evening, because the chat does not show up in any video recording that we've got. There's been plenty of comments about poker and bluffing and things like that as we go. All I'm saying is I would fancy my chances in a game of poker against some of the people who responded off the back of that. But no, thanks again for that, Lee. It was really interesting. Sort of a personal question that I'd come up with myself that I wanted to ask is, with regards to this, the real world implications of this going forward, where would you see kind of the biggest use of this technology going forward to implement value into real world scenarios? I mean, I know you mentioned that the FBI have used it and things like that. Is there anything that you think maybe could come more into the public domain that would offer real value with this, or what your suggestions are? Lee can't unmute. Give me 1 second. I'll actually unmute him to allow him to answer the question.
I think what took me on this journey was just a general interest in nonverbal communication and being able to, when I'm conversing with someone, just to be able to understand how they feel about what I'm saying. So it started with me trying to improve sort of my empathy and my ability to read a situation and how someone's thinking, whether they're touching their lips or their neck, or, for example, Ross, as you were doing just then, what are they thinking when they're doing that? And then, because I've just got this technical software head, I thought, well, maybe we could take some of those and run it through some software. But with regards to real world things, if you watch Lie to Me, they use technology in a very, very similar guise, in a very, very similar way, and they're just interviewing people and just determine if they're telling the truth, if not. I just find it fascinating. I'd say the real world implications would be get a good grasp on nonverbal communication, and then you'll be very, very surprised that you can infer what other people are thinking and saying a lot more than you think you would. So I would strongly recommend that.
Brilliant, thank you. An interesting one here from Ed. He asked, how about sort of stroke victims or other paralysis type situations? Does it fluff the reading, or does it account for it? I don't know whether it's something you've come across as of yet or something you've had to account for.
It's a really good question. It was a use case that I'd had for the augmented reality software, what was actually stroke victims recovery, because it can detect facial expression movement of a lot of different parts of the face to a very high degree on a scale from 0 to 1 and very, very granular in between. I had this idea of you could have some software which would help train people to regain movement in sort of paralyzed parts of the face and help try and bring that back. by exercising muscles in the face, and then you could score it and you could say, okay, I've only got 0.2% movement in that part of the face, and then maybe keep practicing movement in that muscle and then see if it increases over time. I'm not medically trained, so apologies if I don't know much about facial paralysis for stroke victims, so I don't know if that's even possible, but that's one idea I had for the application for that technology. Yeah, sure.
Brilliant.
Whether or not,
cheers. I'm
no
sorry,
worries.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. Whether or not it would fluff it, I don't know. If you could infer emotion in the same way, possibly not, but it would be helpful, I think, for stroke victims for the reasons I say.
Brilliant, thank you. Marta, I won't skip your question, but Ed did come with a follow-up question from that, asking if you could weight it to respond to limited reading.
I'm not sure what he means by limited reading.
I'm assuming, Ed, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if the facial movements were restricted, that you could, reduce sensitivity, that Ed said there. Yeah, you can weight it for that. Yeah, so I had to when I wrote the software, because I had to put a threshold in for if it's something like, if your cheek goes up and it's 0.8, then it's a good fair chance it's a strong movement. Whereas, so I actually had to set those thresholds when I was writing the software. So yeah, absolutely, you could set the sensitivity of different parts of the face. Brilliant, thank you. Marta asked, apart from emoji/emotion faces, what are the other applications for this technology? I've not really given it that much thought. I've seen some applications in film, creating films, where they're not only tracking faces but body movements in real time, and that leads us down a dark road of deep fakes. But a lot of you're getting real time deep fakes coming off the back of similar technology that are tracking the face in real time, and then making my face look like Morgan Freeman and things like that. And then I've seen recently, a slightly different topic, getting better and better, or worse and worse, depending on how you look at it. Voice translation, real-time voice translation of deepfakes as well. So we'll get, so I'm not sure if it's a real world benefit, but I guess we need the ability to understand how this technology is working for deepfakes so we can combat it, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you. Just before anyone thinks I'm skipping their questions again, Marta has just come up with a follow-up question there. Hypothetically, do you think it could be used to help paralyzed patients communicate with the world? I mean, potentially. I'm not entirely sure how. I mean, I know that I believe I read somewhere that Stephen Hawking, some of the equipment that he was using to communicate was tracking eye movement. Now the software that I've been writing, the coding, the experiments I've been doing hasn't been tracking eyes. But I don't know, potentially. I'm not sure how, but I'd never say never. Okay, no problem. Brilliant. And Amatej, I apologize if I've mispronounced that, has asked, do you know of any organizations that are potentially using something like this, maybe for remote interviews for technology to try and gauge emotion? That's one thing that I've found personally when people have been interviewing remotely. They said it's maybe harder to get a gauge of how someone's feeling or reacting when you can only see sort of the shoulders up and can't read body language. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not aware of any software that's doing this for real-time stuff. Though that said, I'm aware that more and more interviews are being recorded, and as someone said earlier, could you write some software which analyzes emotion over time in a video? Absolutely. So you could start pulling video off the web if you wanted, and running the software through and almost indexing happy. So you would get to a point where you could search Google for happy video, and it would just have worked out that there's videos of people being happy inside the video. I don't know. I think something else that someone mentioned, or an idea I've just had, is, we take it for granted, the ability to look at a person and see how they're feeling. Now there's people on the autism spectrum and things like that struggle with seeing a face and be able to understand emotion and how that person's feeling. So you could write something that says, actually that person's quite upset that you're looking at. It's similar in the same way that you've got the seeing eye technology for
that Microsoft had developed, where you could put glasses on and it would say into the blind person what's in the surroundings as they're walking past it. You could have something that says how someone's feeling if someone has a condition which they can't naturally infer emotion, how someone's feeling naturally. Brilliant,
thanks for that. Just a couple of follow-up comments from a couple of people there. Bal mentioned that Facebook had a project on this and they did cancel it in the end. Although Ed mentioned, Ed, I don't know if you have a link to this. It was a negative spin piece, he says, about Chinese organizations using video analysis for candidate fit. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I can't claim to, but Ed, if you do happen to have a link to share with the chat, that would be fantastic to look over, and can go from there. Ian asked, the Azure JSON library seems really simple to implement. Is the ARKit only available on iOS?
So the ARKit is Apple's augmented reality framework for iOS. So yes. Now I know Android have got their augmented reality framework called ARKit. I don't know if that goes into the same level of ability to translate parts of the face. I don't know. I've got a feeling it doesn't. That said, I'm sure there's other frameworks and libraries that do just what's built into ARKit, that analyzes faces frame by frame and be able to tell you which parts of the face move.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So anyone else have any more questions for Lee before I let him wrap up? Thank you again for this. This was really interesting. I'll make sure that the recording does go onto YouTube after this so that we can all share it. But if anyone has any questions, I'll just give you one last chance to pop them in the chat before we move on. Just give everyone a chance to type. Obviously, lots of people saying thank you, and really appreciate that. So again, Lee, we do really appreciate what you've contributed for this event, and it was a very interesting topic. I believe we may, unless anyone wants to stick one last one in, we may be at the point where we are done with questions as far as I can tell. So thank you for that, Lee. Really appreciate it. As mentioned earlier, I will move on now to our first giveaway portion of the evening. Thanks again to Oscar. We do have these laptop bags that we give away every month. They usually kindly stuff a fair few extra bits of swag in there. Something we are working on in person, by the way, with the one benefit that I can offer that I can't offer to remote people for next month is we are looking on getting a swag table put in, just so that you've got plenty of stuff to make it worth your while trekking into Manchester, especially because knowing our luck, it's going to be raining, let's face it. So what I'll do is I'll do my usual random number generator in order to pick. Currently got 49 people in the call. We are going off the order that shows on my screen. We've got number 16 there. That's not showing up clearly at all. Hoping the focus will come in on it. There we go. Number 16. So for me, I've got Christian, if you could drop me a private message, Christian, I will sort out getting you some gifts over as a thank you for attending the SocialCode this evening. I really appreciate it. We're going to move on now. I'll ask Adam Houldsworth to unmute if he hasn't got a child in the background there. There's a BBC News. Yeah, there's a BBC News clip waiting to happen off the back of that.
Yeah, that was almost perfect timing. Literally, I'm about to start, and they're like, "We have showers." It's like, yeah, right.
Yeah. No, really looking forward to this. For those who haven't come across Adam before, Adam has been with us pretty much since the very start. And as my screen just decided to give out, that's just what I need at this point in time. Yep, my HDMI cable has just decided that it doesn't want to work anymore. Let me get this back onto a screen where I can see everything that's working normally. Yeah. Someone said there that you came for the beer and you never left. I can't think of anything more true. I've also never met anyone who I've also never met anyone who orders more pizza to a meetup than when you put Adam in charge of it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, the big disappointment there was the She's vegan pizza. That was utterly terrible.
Yeah, that was horrific. I'll be honest. Now I'll hand over to Adam now. Adam's been working on this talk for a while. I've been nudging him for a while about getting something done for this event, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Right, let me faff about for a minute and share the correct screen, not the one with any inappropriate content on it.
I dread to ask.
Awesome. Right, let's get the mouse off the screen. There we are. So, hi everybody. This is actually my first talk. Ever actually. So I've been going to a variety of meetups around town, and Ross is the only one that's ever been successful in eventually getting me roped into one. I did have to capitulate. Then I had to very quickly think on the spot, what is it I wanted to talk about? And at that point in time, I was debating where my enjoyment came from. It became a permanent thing in my life. So I'd gone through a number of changes and thought, oh, what is it I actually do? So I thought, why not get it down on paper and talk about it, because I like to talk. So that's what I'm doing. So hopefully people find this useful, get some tidbits out of it, my observations. I'll go from there. So here we go. Hopefully my keyboard clicker. Nope, failed at the first hurdle. There we are, go. So I work for a company called Insight Investments. They appeared in Manchester, technically January 2019, but the office opened in April. We are a leading global asset manager. We're responsible for, at the moment, about £707 billion of assets under management. We have offices all over the world and in such auspicious locations as Manchester. So awesome. Hopefully somebody's heard of us by now. We sponsored, I think, what became the last. I don't read into that too personally, but what became the last Hack Manchester, I think. Can't remember if there was another one before it canned. And we intend to keep our name out there and sponsor other things. And I think we were last attempting NDC in Manchester. NDC is pretty decent, but then a pandemic occurred. That was awesome. And like most of Manchester, we're hiring. So, well, I say we're hiring. We are trying to hire, like most of Manchester. So another shameless plug. Who am I? I'm Adam Houldsworth. I've been working in Manchester for about 10 years. I've been in technology for about 15. My years before Manchester were part Devon, part Macclesfield, part Bramall. I have in that time worked for 11 companies, say 11. One of them was for a day. One of them merged, so it was a company and got bought out by another. And then one of them rebranded, which I was there for, which is awesome. So about 8 really. My journey briefly looks like this. I started life failing at Plymouth Uni. I walked through the standard dev roles. I walked through a variety of then other roles beyond dev, and I've ended up where I am today with aspirations of either retiring and or not being sacked, which is always good. Just by way of color coding, the light blue stuff is technical roles. The sort of dark blue stuff is hybrid roles, technical and leadership and a bit of management. And the orange one right at the end, which is what I currently do, is management and leadership. And I bring that up because it will be pertinent at some point. Across all of these roles, excuse me for looking off screen, it's over there for me. Across all these roles, I've enjoyed them at some point, not always, but I've always derived something from each of those roles, which is at least some sort of success. But what tends to happen is the transition. The reason for the transition from one role to another is usually, well, unless it's a promotion, usually because I've lost sight of something, or I'm seeking some form of enjoyment somewhere else. And so enjoyment and happiness is the primary driver behind most of that. So with that, why are we even here? Why isn't anybody here? So it doesn't come as any particular surprise that I don't always enjoy what I do. And to be pretty honest, I might not be enjoying this. I haven't quite decided yet. But in all seriousness, it is a struggle to find satisfaction, enjoyment, or even just basic contentment in what you do. And that's happened to me more times than I can count. You'll have good days, you have your bad days. So this particular talk, as well as being mild therapy, is me trying to understand the value of what I do, where the satisfaction comes from, and most importantly, where the enjoyment comes from. And for you conspiracy theorists out there, it's not a shameless attempt at making people hand the notice in and get into the candidates market. So there is no ulterior motive behind this particular talk and Insight hiring. Honest. So the tech industry, sort of where we all are. Tech is awesome, which is a bit of an odd way to start about enjoyment, because awesome, it's a brilliant job. It's awesome for a number of reasons. It ranges from the creativity behind the role. It's more art than science, but it can also be science and engineering heavy. It doesn't care about your age, doesn't care about your backgrounds. You can work anywhere, as in physically, you can be all over the globe. Stack Overflow being famous for this. You can work in any industry. You can take your C# knowledge to the MOD, healthcare, to e-com, finance sector, still a C# developer. It's a hobby for a lot of people. I don't know many plumbers that go home and carry on plumbing just for the hell of it. But I know almost every developer, at least at some point in their life, has taken the skill home and used it. And as is evident by the SocialCode thriving communities, the social side of it is awesome. So there's a lot to be happy with, which sort of begs the question: why are we talking about happiness and enjoyment in the face of so much awesome? Well, the problems start, to be brutally honest. You compare yourself to others. I've done this before, still do it now. Do you even know what sort of career you want? Do you have a mentor in life? Are you making your career decisions without much guidance? Do you feel underpaid, undervalued? Problems with the manager, usually. Although, if any of my team are on here, no, I'm fine. Problems with the employer, a fear of missing out, pace of change. There's a multitude of things. Another big one is being accidentally missold roles. So, or transitioning to a role, not quite realizing what it means. So not realizing what it's about to do for you. Are you stepping away from coding day to day? You have to then worry about people's performance. You have to worry about their happiness. It's a bit of a challenge. So it's not particularly all rosy all the time. In approaching what is enjoyment in your role, and hopefully some measure of Zen, I found it useful to break it down, because it's not just any one thing. There's a multitude of things that add up to your professional whole. And so to insert the obligatory programming related terminology there, separate your concerns. So I had a quick look at this, and for me, I see a few sides of myself. There's my knowledge of technology, so specific things like frameworks. There's my knowledge of the engineering craft, so less specific things like the solid principles, or things that transcend particular technology. They're just your approach to life, TDD. My personal value, so what I as an individual bring. My professional value, so what I as an employee bring to a particular company, or my skills. My career, my onward journey, so what is it I'm aspiring to do, and what particular path do I want to take, and then underneath it all, what I actually enjoy doing. So, right, what comes in no particular order are my observations on my time. So hopefully this is going to be coherent and make sense. No guarantees. Firstly, right, here we go. So off we go. Find the right company. Now that's a bit obvious, but it's surprisingly nuanced. Software is a bit of a pain. You can work in any industry so long as you can demonstrate that you can do your job. You don't even really need qualifications, right? There's no industry standard for being a C# dev or being a Ruby developer. You just turn up, you can crank out the code, you can solve a problem. Hey, presto, you're in. Used to work with a chap that was in our science department. He was doing missile guidance systems for the MOD at one point in his life. He was just good at maths. It's quite scary actually. So the onus falls on you to understand the industry that you've chosen to move into, which I didn't do all the time, and I suspect a number of other people don't do when they go for their tech. They jump and transition tech roles, and what it means for your day job, and how that's going to impact you, because you can't always bring the swanky new things to every job. Not everywhere is Netflix. You can't turn up with all the simian army and expect to attack everything. Certain industries have got certain regulations. They've got certain things that stop you from doing other things, and these are just realities. And you can see them as hindrances and you can bang your head against that particular wall, or you can see them as engineering challenges and actually try to apply what you know around your constraints and try to get some satisfaction out of that. So understanding how a company operates, what value it respects, what's important to it, where you can accelerate and accentuate that value is a source of a lot of potential satisfaction. I can't really overstate that one well enough. Also, a company is a human thing. So not only is it you have to be targeting the type of industry that you want, you need to work for a good employer. And I've been across Manchester. I've worked for some good and some not so good employers. And the difference usually is they look after you, and so that can have a material impact on your experience. So find the one that fits the way you live, fits your ideals, fits your principles. Finding the right people. So this can fill quite a lot of gaps, surprisingly, and it can be a very big gap if it's missing. Who you work with has a huge impact on your day-to-day existence and your happiness, even if you're not the most social of creatures. Although I don't particularly like that stereotype about developers. Some of the most talkative people I know are developers. You can be in a good team, which is extreme experiential value. You can be in a good wider department. You've got a lot of people you can learn from. It's anything can happen really when there's a lot of people around you. So the working for the right people that give you the right sense, the warm glow, is for me a critical thing, and I've experienced that. I've experienced that most places I've been. I've always been lucky enough to work for and with good people, or have good people work for me. And usually as well, it's there's a learning opportunity here. There's always, if I'm ever the smartest person in the room, run, because you need to learn from people. So having people around you that's got different experiences is only going to give you more breadth in life. Now this one's huge, and I drastically undervalued this at one point in my life, and it caused me a bit of a problem for 2 years. Value your domain knowledge. So we all think we're worth what we're worth because we're good developers, as in I can cut a good line of code. That is multiplied dramatically if you cut a good line of code in the right context for the business you work for. So if you've got a lot of domain knowledge around how e-com websites sell their wares, how the finance sector works, how the health sector works, you can be very well targeted. You can multiply your skills exponentially. Developers often overlook this in their career as they're developing their career. In the face of so much change, so much new technology, I'd rather walk into town and say I know Kubernetes like the back of my hand, which I don't, by the way, than I've been in the finance sector for 10 years. I just happen to be a C# developer. One of them sounds like it's marketable, the other one doesn't. Your abilities as a technologist are multiplied by this effect. It allows you to do the heavy stuff, really. You can't step into a code base and solve the big problems, because quite often they're not technical. They are fundamental misalignments in a code base to the domain that code base is in. And if you don't know that domain, you can't find that misalignment, and nor can you, even if you did find it, nor can you rectify it. It also supports the other side of life, which causes problems for people, I find, which is technical innovation. So you step into a place that's got old technology and you're struggling to push it forward, you're struggling to find or introduce new things. And I found in my existence that the people that were most successful at doing that were actually the people that were most cognizant of what was occurring in the business. So if you are that person that fundamentally understands the business you work for and what's important to them, you can introduce something and spin it with business value. So you can push technology forward, which is the usual reason for leaving for a lot of people. It's also extremely acute when you move industries. So referring back to transitions, you've left a job and you've changed sectors. So going from e-com to finance, for example, not realizing that you can't really take a lot of that with you because e-com stays back there, you land in finance, and I'm not understating when you can be the most senior person in the room. You can be the most senior technologist standing in a circle talking about a stand-up. You can know nothing in the face of a junior dev that happens to have been there for a couple of years. So devalue the domain at your peril, I would say. It also adds to your sort of satisfaction, I would find. You can talk to the business, you can talk to your stakeholders, you can talk to your users more effectively, and they will listen, and you can understand what they're talking about. So for me, imperative. So doing the right work. This differs in the sense that, so where do you get your warm glow from? Are you a problem solver? Are you a delivery focused person? Do you like users using your application? Are you a back-end systems person? Do you like to, lovingly handcraft that just so thing in the background that nobody ever sees? Are you do you like working with a team? Do you like learning things? Figuring that out will pay you back, and there's nothing wrong with being different to somebody else. It also allows you to identify areas for career growth. So I am a back-end developer. What about the UI? What about being a delivery-focused person for a bit? There's somewhere I can go and get experience from. So, different people like different things. Don't get distracted by the happiness of other people as they're doing what suits them, just because you're doing something different. So, it's all very well being the back-end developer when all the UI devs got all the swanky praise because it looks sexy. It's a comparison that doesn't lead you anywhere. I have done that numerous times in the past, thinking, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing this? Why am I not learning JavaScript? Why am I not learning? Why am I not doing UIs? If you try to follow, you might be walking unhappy paths. They're happy for somebody else, but they're not happy for you. Tech also becomes about organizing work and organizing people. So the right work might be, this is where you start to try and climb your career ladder, for example. This for me was a big one. So I wanted to be pushing towards technical leadership, not realizing actually, surprisingly enough, it doesn't involve cutting code very often. So on my path to tech leadership, I realized it wouldn't really rely upon my dev abilities. It was more about my history and my experience, how I could convey what I knew, and my ability to deconstruct problems, which is largely just a mental exercise, backlog elaboration. It then becomes, if you go down this particular path, your ability to lead people, inspire them, teach them, manage them if you need to. So my advice here is not to conflate what brings you peace or happiness with it being a comfort zone. It isn't. It doesn't imply that you aren't unchallenged in what you're doing. The comfort zone means you're not. That's to imply you're not unchallenged, but you can be at peace with what you do, but still be challenged. So don't conflate the two. That can catch you off guard quite easily. Do the work right. Can't be here as some sort of architect if I was telling you that your code's wrong. So enjoy being good at what you do. Actually, this is more of about a personal pride thing, professional pride. We are the people that will, somebody asks, oh, can I have X, Y, Z? Yes, okay, but can you do it this way, please? No, we have a particular way, and we need to stand by this because in future we need to be able to regression test and change, etc. So you're responsible for doing things in a good way, and that's engineering rigor. There's a lot of pride and satisfaction to be derived from that, and being able to sort of stand up to those principles. It's also good for when you're going home. You'll have those days where the code is just like just perfect, and you've solved the problem. The code's sweet as it can be. And hopefully you've done it at the end of the day on a Friday, which is always best. So you get a multiplying factor of beer and weekend about to land on you. And you have a lovely weekend, as opposed to that P1 critical issue at 4:59. Another thing I would say here as well is just a bit of an aside. We don't get much feedback. Dev's one of these roles where you're almost entirely told that you're wrong, and it's awesome. You do a code review and it gets criticized. A QA turns up and breaks your code. A user turns up and says, that's not what I wanted. And then before you know it, you're going a bit dejected, thinking, oh, well, at least it compiled. Give positive feedback to people. If you see that beautiful PR turn up, tell them. It will add to the motivation and to the sort of drive of a person during the day to know that they're doing good work. Because I don't hear of much positive feedback very often. I try to encourage it where I can. So I'd like to encourage others. You can't learn everything. Welcome to technology. So don't try. This one for me was a big killer because if you're anything like me, you get skittish over technology. This is awesome. Everything that turns up is awesome. You just want to learn it. What's this? How do I use it? What can I use it for? But it is also exacerbated by a lot of other factors. You can't learn it all, and then life is going to land on you and prove to you that you can't learn it all. So you just feel a bit naff. Software and technology are in constant flux. You can't learn it, so stop trying. Accept being able to put technology down, accept not being the expert in things. Don't devalue what you do know, right? To be brutally honest, and it irritates me to say this, WinForms is still around and it's going to be around for a while. So and that's what I know, and not ashamed to admit it, somewhat ashamed to admit it, but you know, as much as I want to forget it, I can't for some reason. And actually, everywhere I've turned up, they've always had it. So it's got sticking, you know, the value sticks. So, you know, don't devalue what you do know currently. But don't take this as advice not to learn. So yeah, I've successfully managed to forget WinForms and stuff. I don't think you successfully managed to learn it, mate. Bit of ribbing there anyway. So don't take it as advice not to learn. Be selective, drive to depth in an area, take a chance on something. So don't over worry about technology moving beyond. So there's value in the learning process. You might have chosen to learn Angular and then React, and that's fine. You know, you're not going to be the React expert, but you're not going to be far off transition. So, you know, pick something, drive to depth, be selective, and build that around what you enjoy. Technology always changes. Not a repeat of the last slide, honest. This one relates to the fear of stagnation and irrelevance, which is a big one, especially when you've not got any career guidance and you see the new swanky tech turning up and you're stuck on WinForms. Tech will always change, but the unwritten rule behind that is everybody in technology knows that it will change, which means people have actually got much more realistic expectation than you think. So if you're worried about your marketability or your ability to change jobs, people on the other side, the hirers, aren't there going to be expecting you to be the expert in the latest and greatest. They're actually probably going to be looking for other qualities. If you learn how to learn, and if you become proficient at, you know, adopting new technology, people will recognize this and trust that you can continue to do so. That's the power. I don't look at a CV as a hiring manager and look at technology. I never say, right, I'm looking for MVC, ASP.NET, you know, API core, cores 2 and 3. Whatever, I don't look at that. I look for the intangible stuff and the craft skills. So I look for your attention to detail. I look for, you know, how you're interlacing your testing. I look for other things, your behavior towards challenges, your maturity, your adaptability. So, you know, don't fret over the fact that tech keeps changing. Now, don't get me wrong, you might need to be, you might want expertise in an area. By all means, go to market for it. But most hiring is at the inflection of tech change. Or growth, right? And so at which point you're not chasing specific things, you're chasing just good engineers. So, you know, when you worry about, you know, a lot of transitions in your career, a lot of your unhappiness is going to stem from fear. And I've observed, or at least in hindsight, I look back and think, actually, you know, that would have been fine. And often people assume marketability means the latest tech, like I said. It really is not true. I always conflated that with my ability to move my career dial, and that then impacted my happiness. The ability to be happy in your role and know what your value is itself very marketable, and you'd be surprised how often that can be picked up. And so the people you're going to see will understand your passion. You know, you understand where you get your happiness from, you understand the value that you bring. That's going to be infinitely more valuable than doing C# for 6 or 7 years. And as I think I've proven over my years of, or at least I've seen enough evidence to prove it in my head, fears of stagnation are a bit unfounded. I've never seen the old shuffled out to make way for the new. You know, a lot of the time tech changes, language changes, technology changes, but I've seen successful developers of all ages adapt. I've seen people that have been with a company for 3 months and people that have been with the company for 6 years move along with the waves. It really isn't a thing, or at least not one that I can see. So variety is the spice, right? This relates back to the comparison points. I have seen all types of developers be successful. People that have dropped out of school, some of the best developers I've ever met. Academic overachievers, they do brilliantly. People coming to tech from another career, I've seen that. So I've got 15 years under my belt, but one of my respected colleagues has got 6 or 7, and you know, he's doing very well. People that do the 9 to 5, people with kids, you know, people that take the work home with them, you name it, there's a wide variety. And across all that, there's no one format that dictates the ability of an individual to derive enjoyment from what they do or be good at what they do. So don't compare or be distracted by the fact your situation or interests or source of enjoyment are different to somebody else's, because any good dev team or any good dev department needs a wide variety of it. Your career, well, that's a bit obvious. Your career changes. Yeah, it does. But the mild irony in this situation, not very mild, it's quite horrible actually, is that your tech career often quite actively tries to remove you from technology. It really tries to rip you out. So as you think you're climbing up, the keyboard goes over there somewhere. It's like, no, I want the keyboard. Bring it with me. It's if you go that, it's not true everywhere. Obviously, you can be I don't know, work for Google. You can be the search bloke that sits there on his laptop all day. A lot of businesses around Manchester and a lot of businesses that hire technologists have got a good spread of tech roles, but also then leadership and managerial. So that's where the removal comes from. Your career options trajectory are different per company, per individual. No two paths are the same. No two people walk the same path. Consider your transitions again carefully. It's impacted me before, and it will impact me in the future. It offers the best opportunity to disrupt your happiness levels. You'll have a spike of enjoyment, and then you'll realise, oh, this role wasn't quite for me. I didn't realise that bit was in this role. I was missold that. It's not one to take like. You're usually doing it as a bit of a knee jerk. Oh, I'm going to go and notice, and X, Y, Z. I'm going to go for. Oh, that role's got more money, etc. Fulfillment and career growth also don't need role and title changes. You can expand, leaning on your domain knowledge. You can expand into more responsibilities, and still not make yourself less marketable. Still not make yourself less able to move. Patience and self-awareness will not make you less marketable than you'll come across. So careful consideration there. Your life also changes. So biggest one, maybe not biggest, irritating one, kids. But remain aware of what's happening in your life. When you start out, you've probably got very few responsibilities. You've probably got a lot of time and energy to dedicate to your career, and you will do that means learning at home, honing your skills, home projects, extracurricular work, you name it, you can do it. As your life changes, time and energy tend to get pulled and redirected, and that's your choice really. Or it is. So, but either way, it will impact your ability to invest in yourself for your career. And if you're not ready for it, emotionally or whatever, you will suffer from that. You will have a downtrodden. You'll have a down period where you're thinking, "Oh, I didn't quite, wasn't quite expecting that to take all my time away. I feel as though I'm suffering in the job." It's okay. It doesn't make you any less valuable. You need to try and align what your life is, what's occurring in your life with what you're doing in your role, and what you're doing for your career. And quite often, sometimes that can mean ditching your career and going somewhere else. But it can also make you more valuable, because these life experiences often teach you something. Learning how to manage children is always surprising now. So it's not to say that I was working with children, not looking at any Toby in particular, but useful skills. It can also coincide well with transitioning away from pace. So, trying to keep up with technology, trying to, burn the candle at both ends. But you step into leadership roles, you step into management roles. Growth becomes more moderately paced, which coincides with the fact that your life is also getting a bit busier. That took a while to show on my screen. That was ironic. Now, this one's quite important, I think. Some of the most content people I've ever met are not chasing their career, and they will actually downright fool you into thinking they've got no motivation whatsoever, and it couldn't be further from the truth. They are, in my opinion, affording time to a section of their career that they are enjoying, and they are battling against fear of missing out, the famine mindset where you think there's going to be no opportunities in the future. They're battling against the progression of their peers that may be younger, maybe older. They have to sit there and deliberately think, actually, I want to be a senior dev for a bit longer. I quite enjoy this role. I want to get some depth. And that's not easy to do because there's a lot of stuff around you that tries to pull you across, pull you up, whatever. But when I look back across some of the individuals I've worked with, some of the happiest people that I've seen in the office place were the ones that were good at what they did. And they were happy with the fact that they were good at what they did, and they weren't, aggressively trying to chase the next step. They would do so. I saw them transition. Not all of them. Saw some of them transition, and when they did, it was extremely measured. So that would be my observation. That brings me to wrapping up my observations. So the elusive elements, I would say, enjoyment. Everything I've covered is very much from my own perspective across my dev career. Like I said, it was triggered by something outside of my dev career. It was triggered by a bit of a seismic change in my personal life. To drop a metaphor, I'd sort of pulled over in a lay-by on the road of life, and only this time did I actually wonder how I arrived here. And that's where the reflections began. So, you know, how do you find enjoyment and what works for me? I have no idea. So good luck. What works for you is only for you to decide. And regarding me, hopefully you were paying attention, but it's irrelevant anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Adam. That was really interesting, and it puts a lot of things in perspective. So really do appreciate that. We've got plenty of time for questions now. If anyone would like to run any by us, Lee says Lego seems to give you enjoyment, and you can't go wrong with Lego.
Yep, I've got some to build as well. And Star Wars, yes, definitely
Yeah,
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
The two married up, so what can I say? I waste a lot of money on this.
Is that just an entire Lego Star Wars room?
Actually, yeah, well, it's not entirely. There's computer stuff there, and then the Lego Star Wars pervades into other rooms, so I need to sort of bring it back under control.
His PC is a Death Star. Brilliant.
I don't run that one anymore because I started working from home, and running a 1,000-watt power supply was a bit pricey. So yeah.
Not related to the talk, but Christian asks, what's your latest purchase Star Wars wise?
These four: the Republic gunship, Meditation Chamber, Moff Gideon's cruiser from The Mandalorian, and the Bad Batch shuttle.
Brilliant. Has anyone got any questions for Adam following this talk, or anything they'd like to ask?
Deathly silence.
Just give it a second, see if there's anyone got anything there for you.
I take it personally.
What drives you?
What drives me?
Yeah.
At the moment, other people actually. So I am enjoying. It's about to get better because our office is soon to reopen. But I'm enjoying building the Manchester office and trying to hire the right people. And then I invest a lot of time and energy trying to make sure that the work that is on offer and people's experiences in their teams is living up to par. So watching our teams, our product teams succeed is driving me. As I try to transition and adapt to a role where I add value, not by cutting code.
Brilliant, cheers. I've just had one sent directly to me that I think was meant for the chat. It says, have you had any mentoring experience? And if so, what was the influence on you?
Have I had any mentor, as in, have I had a mentor or have I tried to be one? I've had one mentor loosely, but I didn't quite realize at the time, my time at ARKit, because our officers were good people to learn from. So that was late teens, nothing in technology. I've been fortunate to work for some very good senior developers in my time. One of my first jobs was I was surrounded by seniors. I turned up to a role that was for a tester. And I said, the first words out of my mouth were, I don't want to be a tester, I want to be a developer. And he said, all right, we'll interview for a dev then. And I worked for 3 very good seniors. So I've worked for very good technologists over the years and some very clever people. Not quite career guidance and mentoring, but hopefully positive influences. In terms of mentoring, I haven't had an opportunity to do it seriously. There's 1 or 2 opportunities at Insight at the moment because we've got apprentices, but I'm not directly involved with that, which is a bit of a shame. So I've only got so much time.
Brilliant, thank you. And anyone else got any questions before we move on? Thank you again, Adam. That was really enjoyable, and I think for a first talk at a meetup, that was something pretty special. So
Thank you.
Good on you.
I enjoyed it.
We'll not give you a P45 in the morning.
Indeed.
As much as Laura recommended it. So if anyone else has any questions, I'll give you one last chance to put them in. It's looking like just plenty of thank yous. So we'll move on from there. We will go to our second giveaway of the evening. Same as last time, we've currently got 47 people in the event, and if you can see there is the number 6. It's probably pretty terrible. So for me, 1, 2, 4. Alex, not if you want to message me, we will arrange for you to have a laptop bag with some goodies sent over to you. If you just drop me a private message, Alex, I'll get you the details of what I need from there. I will hand over now to our last speaker of the evening. Really glad that he's made it in. John, if you can just turn your camera, there you are. Brilliant. So for those of you who don't know John, John is sort of a well-known face in the contract JavaScript world in the Northwest, and also runs the Tweak Digital podcast, which during lockdown I had the pleasure of appearing on after many attempts with Wi-Fi. I've moved house since then, so it's all good now. But would highly recommend, if you've got any interest in the tech scene, giving that a listen and taking it from there. John, you should be able to share your screen now, and I'll hand over to you.
Top stuff. You can hear me okay, Ross?
Yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. Right. Forgive me if I'm a bit slow with this. It's not usually me doing the presenting. I'm usually one sat with my camera off, twiddling my thumbs, but let's give this a whirl. Right. Okay. Share my screen. Sorry, I'm sure everyone else was far slicker at this than I've been, but there you are.
It's all good. It's Zoom. It's a nightmare. Aidan's just asked in the chat before I cut off. The podcast call is Tweak Digital. It's on Spotify. I'll hand over to you now, John.
Righto. Let's get going. Everyone can see my my screen. It's I've kept the slides fairly Spartan, shall we say? So it's just a black background, some text there. So Ross, I'm hoping if you can see it, everyone else can.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Brilliant. So this evening, I wanted to go through some of my greatest hits, specifically learning from your mistakes, or in this case, learning from mine. So jumping straight in, obviously, we're all human, mistakes happen, but the important thing is, how can we benefit from them? So giving it a little bit of thought, there's 2 obvious ways you can learn from them. And by extension, I would encourage you to try and make more mistakes to increase the number of learning experiences that open themselves up to you, but also to make mistakes safely. So anyone who's been in software for any length of time will understand, all the tools we use to try and increase the confidence with which we might put a piece of code out into production. So these range obviously from fairly manual sort of processes, manual testing, code reviews, stuff like that, right the way through to more advanced and more automated tools. But all of them are effectively tools that will allow you to F up, but do so in a more sort of controlled environment, and you can sort of spot things going wrong and learn from them in the process. An important thing I would like you to consider in that sort of in a similar vein is making mistakes safely is learning from others. So as engineers, be quite rare that we sort of operate in isolation, and the team around you, regardless of their role, usually offer fantastic learning experiences. It's always far easier to let someone else drop the ball and learn from their mistake rather than to do so yourself. There's countless stories of people who've dropped the ball in life, etc. And there's loads of opportunities to learn basically without laboring the point too much. So in this case, you're going to get 4 of my greatest hits this evening. I'm just about at a stage in my career where I feel confident enough to do this, but yeah, some of these are pretty toe curling. So hopefully you can either benefit by not doing them yourself or just sort of laughing at my expense. So let's jump into mistake number 1. The year was 2010. My employer was an international school. My wife and I actually graduated from uni and went to work in Thailand as TEFL teachers, but it mentioned ever so slightly at the bottom of my CV, oh, and by the way, I can build websites. So they gave me a job as sort of, I like to think of myself as a systems administrator, but the job title was more along the lines of IT guy. So what was I doing when I fucked up? Pardon me there, Ross. I had said to alert people if I was going to swear, but are we okay? Are we safe to proceed? I'll assume so, mate. I'll assume so. I'll keep it clean just in case there's any children on this evening.
Yeah, just realised I was on mute, but I can edit that out.
That's fine.
In the recording after.
We'll be grand. We'll be grand. So my action at the time as sort of IT guy, I was cleaning the head's laptop. She was running this old horrible Windows machine that was, on its last legs. There was loads of crap installed on there, and I thought I would, do her a favor, clean some of the bulk out, and make it run a little bit quicker. As I recall, the sentence that I uttered at the time was, "You definitely don't need SQL Server," but it turned out that she was running MS accounting, something along those lines anyway. So the entire accounts for the school were housed and homed on my boss's laptop. This wasn't a small school either. There was probably, in excess of 600 children there. So there's a whole conversation about whether or not that was a sensible thing to do. But let's focus on the fact that, yes, hold my hands up, I was probably ever so slightly heavy-handed. So what was the fallout from deleting the database? Well, predictably, there were no more. Oh, there we go. There were no more accounts. So we spent about a day, or I spent about a day scrounging this laptop looking for any form of backup. There was none to be found. This was 2010, so Dropbox was around, but that was probably about the extent of it. Maybe people were using Google Drive, but there were no backups on site or off site or in the cloud or anywhere. I scratched my brain trying to sort of figure out anything that was possible. Looked at rolling, back to sort of earlier. I can't even remember what I did now. I tried to sort of scrounge the disk looking for any form of backup, but the long and short of it was there weren't any. So what was the solution? Well, it turns out there wasn't one. So you just have to sort of take it on the chin sometimes. And in this case, luckily, I held on to my job. It was pretty rough for a few days. There was a lot of, toe curling moments, but the long and short of it is in this instance, what I'd like to sort of impress upon you, if you did have some sort of, granted, this was a long time ago, I was early in my career, and, it was all a bit fly by night out in Thailand anyway, but if you have a similar sort of situation yourself that you find yourself in, you'll see one of the common themes in the subsequent mistakes, and indeed this one, is that I always just owned up, put your hand up. Yeah, I effed up, sorry. Because if you try and start covering your tracks, I mean, some people will do that, but you'll get found out invariably, and, you're not really contributing to a solution in that case. So in the circumstances, if you find yourself in this sort of position, I would just own up and try and own the mistake and, put some effort in trying to fix it. But, if that's not looking likely, then, address that and, just try and move things forward and be honest with people, because I found that worked far better than trying to sort of, be deceptive, shall we say. So what did I do wrong? The list is obviously quite long, but, you could wrap this up in basically my assumption that I knew what I was doing. I was being very, very heavy-handed with someone else's machine. I didn't for the life of me assume that all of the accounts for the school would be held on there, because why on earth would they? That's a ridiculous idea. But the lesson to be learned here is probably, not to make assumptions, not to be so heavy-handed with systems you don't necessarily fully understand. Don't rush. I didn't make any form of backup myself on the assumption that, this tool that may or may not have been installed as a part of a wider group of software products was actually being used. And yeah, as I say, just to not rush the job. Sorry, kind of labored the point there a little bit, but so what can you learn? If you're doing something similar, I appreciate this is probably not directly related to software development, but it's always helpful to have backups, obviously. It's always helpful to have ways to roll back your changes. It's always helpful for your changes to go through multiple gates. So this is sort of bog standard stuff these days in software development. If you make a change, it's likely to get, as an example, you might do that as a payer. You might subsequently have that code reviewed. You might have it have to pass a suite of tests. And it has to pass through all of those gateways before it ever sees the light of day. Now, obviously, what I was doing is slightly different. But the major lesson is, as I say, don't rush, don't make assumptions, don't be so heavy-handed when you're working with systems you don't fully understand. But the key one here is not to assume that people operate the way you would. even at 22, I would never ever have run an accountancy package for school on a single laptop like that. But that's not necessarily the way that a 40-year-old head teacher would operate. So tread carefully. So on to mistake number 2. Now, they do get better. This one was probably more costly, but let me set the scene. The year was 2017. I was now a contract front-end developer. My employer was an agency called Degree 53. Now, if anyone from Degree 53 is on the call, or they know anyone from Degree 53, I can't apologize profusely enough for what happened at this intersection, but there we go. It's in the past. So I was actually a contract front-end developer. Something that I've been asked is, are expectations different for contractors, and insofar as, do you have to do code reviews? Do you have to do pair programming? It's like, yeah, absolutely. And the moral of this story is, yeah, like contractors make mistakes as well. We're all human. So what did I do? I changed the data model in the CMS we were working on a site for a large gambling company at the time. I don't know if I'm allowed to say or not, but anyway, could figure that one out reasonably easy if you desperately wanted to. So I changed the data model anyway. The sports book, which to any of you who are unfamiliar with gambling, is effectively where you go to gamble for sports. So it might say football, cricket, golf, Formula One, whatever. And I can't actually remember the specifics of the change I was trying to make, but I added a particular attribute to the object coming back from the CMS for football and football alone. Tested the happy path. Everything worked fine. And in this instance, the words I uttered were, yeah, well, football works just fine. At that point, I, sent the changes out into the ether. They were merged into some sort of production build or release that was due to go out the following week. Now, I should make clear at this point, and I'm not trying to throw anyone else under the bus here, but this code had been tested locally by me, granted. We had some unit tests around it that I'd written. The code had subsequently been reviewed. It had passed through a regression test suite, both on its own as a feature and as part of the release build. But the long and short of it was, I went on holiday. The CEO and the COO went to visit the particular client, and on the morning they went to visit, the production build was sent out, and I managed to break any sports that weren't football, because as you might have connected the dots here, I'd changed this data model, but only for football. And all of the sports in the sports book used a shared template. So because of my low quality code and my unfamiliarity, I suppose, with TDD and decent sort of test coverage, and then subsequently only testing the happy path because, well, that's the obvious thing to do, I'd managed to inadvertently break anything that wasn't football. So you couldn't place any bets on their website unless it was on football. Not a good look, and not a good look for you as a contractor if the CEO and the COO are on site, and an even worse look if you happen to be a few hundred or 1,000 miles away on holiday at the time. Maybe a good thing in retrospect. I don't know. I was able to sort of avoid the worst of the flack, but emails did start coming through that day, which kind of put a downer on the holiday. So how did the team fix it? Well, obviously it wasn't. It was my mistake, I guess, to own it, but we'd all sort of failed as a team, as a unit. The team had done the deployment, so the team rolled back the deployment. Now that wasn't too onerous, but it wasn't necessarily trivial, and it just looks a bit amateur, I guess. As a team, you're sort of, you're trying to build a quality product, and here's us with the boss of the company out at the client site, and we're having to deploy and then inadvertently roll back because our production build is broken. So again, the lesson to learn here, if this does befall you, I wish it doesn't, but if it does, own it. Just put your hands up. Yes, that was my mistake. Some companies handle these sorts of things better than others, as you'll see in the future. Now, I didn't get, taken apart by these guys. They were pretty understanding, all told. I did come back and did get a bit of a minor telling off from the CTO at the time, and yeah, probably rightfully so. It was pretty amateurish on my part. The approach wasn't great. And the team were pretty good, all told. No one was sort of finger pointing or anything, but it was, red face, curled toes. So if it does happen to you, just own it. don't try and deny it. Don't try and blame anyone else. Just take it on the chin. What did I do wrong? Well, again, as I've sort of alluded to, a lack of TDD. TDD probably would have caught this, but also I've already said it was unit tested, but unit test coverage was only sort of around, football. So I guess as a wider team, if we had TDD in place, we maybe would have had a better approach to the problem and possibly have solved it in its infancy. But I guess, by extension, I wrote a low quality piece of code. It didn't fail gracefully. It was very rigidly coupled to this data model and expected a particular attribute to be there that wasn't. And yeah, that was uncovered by only testing the happy path. So again, what can you learn? Well, TDD is popular for a reason. Good test automation probably would have called it. Don't just test the happy path. And don't rely on other links in the chain. So it's all well and good me sitting here saying, well, it was, code reviewed by someone else, and then we ran the regression test suite against it, and it was manually tested as an individual feature, et cetera, et cetera. But, the team live and die by the sort of successes and failures as a group, you want it that way because you're not singled out then when things go wrong, and you all get to sort of celebrate your victories together. But at the same time, you do have a sort of professional responsibility to try and do things to a certain standard. But if it does happen to you, as I say, just own up and just own the problem. Right, on to mistake number 3. Now they are starting to get a little bit less drastic, shall we say. This was 2018, so a bit more recent. I was still contracting. My employer was rentalcars.com, and again, my job was contract front-end developer. So what was I working on at the time? Well, I was changing a logo element. The project was for the booking.com car rental affiliate of rental cars. So they wanted to use the booking.com logo rather than rental cars powered by booking.com, something along those lines, a minor stylistic change. What could possibly go wrong changing some CSS? Well, I changed the CSS so it married up to the booking.com logo, all looked good. And, more or less remember authoring the words, well, affiliate site looks good. Again, you'll notice there's a theme here of me testing the happy path and not looking at other sort of wider consequences. The fallout of me reducing the width of the logo to make it work with the affiliate made the rental cars logo look something like that. Again, not a good look. Immediately picked up, immediately tracked back to our team and tracked back to a change that, the git blame showed my name. So there's no hiding. Again, just own your mistake. So picked up on deployment. The fix that was suggested from the off was to roll back the deployment. Now, at the time, I don't know if it's changed. So I left rental cars in 2019, but in 2018, at least, deployments took the best part of half of a day. It involved taking data centers in and out of traffic. It wasn't something you wanted to do lightly. And obviously rolling back a deployment builds up this sort of log jam or backlog of subsequent tickets that are due to go out in releases. So again, the team were great. The infrastructure engineers were great. They would have helped us had we said like, this absolutely needs to be, the fix for the solution. But my immediate response was panic. I was only in the job a few weeks, and I'm there sort of, big dog contract front engineer trying to sort of make a good impression. And I think it was possibly one of the first 5 tickets I picked up and had managed to do this. So discussing our options as a team, rolling back the deployment seemed like a very, very poor choice at this point in time. So we started to discuss, what else availed itself to us. So someone on the team knew of sort of backdoor, if you will. There was an opportunity to do a static content deployment. So again, the team were fantastic at rental cars, a total no blame culture. And as much as I tried to sort of take ownership for, my mistake, nobody was using the words you, it was all we. What did we do wrong? Where have we dropped the ball? How can we fix this? I don't think my name was even mentioned. It was literally just a case of, all the engineers sort of scrambling around like, how can we fix what's gone wrong and how can we fix it? So as I say, I owned it this time because that's what had worked well for me in the past, but genuinely nobody cared. They just wanted it fixed. So we managed to do a static content deployment, which was basically just CSS and JavaScript. It was another like little pipeline out to like some sort of CDN or something. So it's effectively a little patch that overrode the deployment that was in another. And yes, the code base was fairly nebulous, but it was another part of the site serving up this piece of CSS that I changed. So we were able to patch it and get it working again, which was then subsequently fixed properly in a later release. So what did I do wrong? Again, as I said, I only tested the happy path. And again, harkening back to the first instance, the first mistake I addressed was that I assumed I knew what I was doing with, to be honest, quite an old, quite convoluted web application, lots of moving parts. And it was a good sort of introduction to it, I suppose, because it definitely drove home this message of like treading with caution anytime you touched any part of it, which isn't, the best place to be in the world as an engineer, but at least, we were able to make changes more safely. So again, what can you learn? Tread carefully with complex projects, own your mistakes. In this case, asking for help was an absolute lifesaver. It was going to happen anyway. The team were going to rally around. They were going to find out it was my mistake. They were going to rally around, and they were probably going to behave that way. But rather than trying to sort of own it completely and say, this is my mistake, I'm going to fix it, I just embraced, the team offering their help. But put yourself in their shoes. So it's like if there's someone fairly new to your project, it's like you might have worked in fairly acrimonious environments, but certainly rental cars was not one. And had I been in their shoes, some new guy joins the project and they do something like that, you might roll your eyes, but you're interested in getting the thing fixed rather than we can sit here and point the finger at each other all day, but let's just fix the problem. And an important one from this, I would say, is not to rush. If you find yourself in this situation, don't rush, examine your options, and take a little bit of time to figure out which is the best in the circumstances. Because for us, rolling back a deployment would have been slower and far more risky than the solution we ended up going with, which just took a little bit longer to identify. Right, finally, mistake number 4. They are really starting to get, in my opinion, much smaller now. Maybe you'll disagree, but there you are. The year was 2019. My employer was Co-op. And in this case, I was, again, contract front-end developer. But in this project in particular, there were other front-end engineers in the company. But on this particular replatforming exercise, I was the only front-end engineer on the project. So that had the knock-on effect of code reviews taking a little bit longer than I might have liked. You had to sort of go out onto Slack and say, whoever, please can you take a look at this piece of code that you've got absolutely no familiarity with? Just drop whatever you're doing because I need this merged. It was a little bit inconvenient. And to add, while there've been quite rigid gateways at booking.com, at rental cars, Co-op were a little bit more trustworthy of their engineers and of their code base. So there were much easier ways of getting through these gates. You could effectively merge without a PR being approved. You could deploy all the way up to staging effectively without any sort of serious approval. So I guess with great power comes great responsibility. And in this case, I was a teeny tiny bit irresponsible. But what was I doing? Anyway, I was updating the footer copyright for Co-op Legal Services. So rather than reading Co-op Group Limited, it needed to read Co-op Legal Services Limited, something fairly innocuous, it seemed. I made the change. As I said, PRs took a little bit longer than I would have liked. And what could possibly go wrong? It was just a tiny, tiny change in the single text file in the shared header and footer. So yeah, I think my words were along the lines of, I'll just make this tiny change quickly. I'll approve it myself. I'll merge it. No one will be any the wiser. Happy days. We can get it into testing. And it can be on this demo for these stakeholders later today. Everyone will be happy. So I edited the right file in the wrong directory, which meant that I edited the shared footer rather than the legal footer, which translated into all sites using the shared footer displaying Co-op Legal Services Limited instead of Co-op Group Limited. So again, hearing that, it might sound fairly innocuous, but there were legal covenants in place basically that required them to show the business entity on the website for certain business units. So in this case, picked up immediately by a monitoring service that someone had in place, luckily. within sort of 5 minutes of it going out, I was being messaged on Slack, being asked to, what had gone wrong? Could I fix it? So the fix in this case was to do it properly. Made the change to the right file, reverted the change to the wrong file, had it approved this time, got it deployed. Again, the team were fantastic, monitoring service in place, so it was identified really, really quickly, and a no blame culture. Again, they just wanted it fixed. You'll notice as well that we were able to fix it properly because they had good systems in place. It was a far more modern code base. There wasn't any sort of legacy stuff hanging around. So it was really straightforward in the end. And admittedly, the change was quite small. So it wasn't too big a deal in the end. So what did I do wrong? Well, I got lazy with code reviews. I took advantage of this lack of gatekeepers, and I rushed basically. And again, only considered the happy path. What can you learn? Better systems make for sort of faster fixes and more confidence with your deployments, as we saw with that fix. Again, asking for help, really good. Being communicative will help you avoid these issues, and just follow the processes. Your team will have put processes in place for a reason. Even if you think they slow you down or you think they're stupid, going against them is not the best way of dealing with that. Having a conversation about whether or not they're appropriate is probably a better approach in that case. So common themes. There's a couple of things here. I'm not going to labor the point too much because I feel like I've talked for England this evening, but there you are. So the first one, for me at least anyway, slow down a bit. Particularly as a junior, I think I was very, very keen to sort of, impress upon people how quickly I could get something done. And I still slip into this from time to time, but it's better to take, a little bit longer and do it right and do it once and it pass testing first time and be able to be deployed than it come back repeatedly. And I'm definitely still guilty of, failing to read a ticket in completion or failing to look through all the ACs or write enough tests to cover it for everyone to be happy. So I would encourage you to, particularly if you're a junior, slow down a bit, do it right, be a bit more methodical. Communicate. So again, a lot of the times I've gotten into trouble, it's been when I've been operating in isolation for long periods of time, not communicating to others about what I think a solution might be or a piece of work might involve. So things like pair programming obviously solve that. But even if you do, mess up, ask for help, own your mistake, and use the people around you to try and get a good fix in place and a good fix in place quickly. So finally, follow processes. As I say, if something's not working for you, the time to address that is not, during a deployment, it's during, a retro or, stand up or whatever it might be, but like communicate why it's not working to you with the right people. Don't just moan about it and don't just try and break it intentionally to circumvent it because it makes your life more convenient. So a couple of, preemptive questions on this front. Does your role change things? Well, as you've seen, juniors will F up. Pardon me, Ross. If you're a senior or more senior or mid-level, whatever, or a tester or a BA, whoever you are, if an engineer is messed up and they're a junior, just be patient with them. That was me at some point. It could well have been you at some point. If you're moving out of a less technical role into a technical role, it could well be you at some point. So a little bit of patience goes a long way. And help them try and limit the damage from the mistakes. What can they learn? Try and sort of impress that upon them. What systems can you put in place to mitigate damage should this kind of thing happen again? I'm of the opinion seniors tend to mess up less. It's arguably why they're paid a bit more. You're paying for that experience, but it does still happen. I guess as I consider myself a senior, I'm probably far more prone to messing up in a small way or messing up in dev rather than, once something goes out to prod. I'm more reliant on, my own sort of systems and methodology rather than, just relying on a code review to make sure that my code works as it should, because that's not what code review is really for anyway. I'd say we probably only mess up less because we've made our mistakes, there's no shortcut to experience. And as one guy I chatted to on the podcast said, it's like, if you're a junior, you've not got enough battle scars kind of thing for, to command the rate that a senior might. So moving on from that, contractors will mess up too. Being a contractor does not make you special. You possibly have a wider range of experiences if you've drawn from a larger number of projects, a larger number of clients. But it could go either way. You could end up in the situation that if you spent a long period of time working on one project and then you leave, you've lost all that domain knowledge because it's all tied in with that one client you've been working at for a long time. The long and short of it is, as a more senior contractor, I definitely just proceed far more methodically and with a lot more caution these days. I've put the same slide in there twice, so please forgive me. So in conclusion, mistakes can obviously be helpful. You can laugh at my mistakes at my expense, but you can learn from them as well. You can learn from the team around you. And most importantly, the most painful ones are the ones that are going to stick with you, so you can learn from your own as well. They're only really a loss if you fail to do that. Something I'd encourage you to do, though, is think about becoming anti-fragile. This is a term from an author called Nicholas Nessim Taleb, I believe his name is. So he says the opposite of something that's fragile is not sturdy, it's anti-fragile. So this is like the airline industry. Every time the airline industry has a crash, it becomes safer because they identify, what went wrong, how can we avoid that happening again? And again, with your team, don't just sort of write these mistakes off and then never speak of them again. If you own them and sort of air them, you've got a great opportunity there to sort of tighten your systems, tighten your processes, identify what went wrong, and avoid being me with egg on my face, basically. So that concludes the presentation. I hope everyone's still awake. I can see some cameras are turned on, but I hope I've not lost the whole audience. So I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Cheers for that, John. That was really interesting, and it was a very different perspective on a talk. I found that very refreshing. There was one that came in just before the end of your talk from, I believe it's Aji. I apologize if I've mispronounced that. You said something about slowing down. Do you not worry about deadline management and management demanding results, for example?
Not so much. So I had a chat with a mate on Tuesday, and the way he just before I answer that, Ross, shall I stop sharing my screen here? Would that be helpful?
I'll be reading out the questions anyway, just because with the recording, no one will be able to see them on the chat for the YouTube stuff. But either or. That's
fine. In terms of deadline management, let's assume you're working on a sort of project delivery team. You're going to have a BA, you're going to have a tech lead and a delivery manager, hopefully, or something along those lines. The way my friend sort of summed it up is it's like everyone's pulling on their piece of rope. So you as the tech lead or your tech lead want it done to the sort of highest standard possible. The BA wants all the features and the delivery manager wants it done yesterday. So there's a negotiation involved. You should always sort of, fight your corner, I guess, but you have to sort of moderate and determine that for yourself as to like what's realistic. It's like obviously, there's budgets involved. You can't build everything to, absolute AAA spec, but you should probably be working in that direction, or at least having a conversation around what's important here. Is it more important that we get this feature at the door, or that it works reliably? And that's a conversation I have quite often. I'm quite happy to sort of drag my heels a little bit and say like, no, I want to do this right rather than just rush it, because it saves you time in the long run. If you write something that's elegant and well tested, fails gracefully, etc., 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 you're not responding to bugs in production as much. It's likely to be easier to build on top of that in the future. So there's definitely buy-in required from the delivery heads or the people holding the purse strings. But if you can press upon them that effectively it sounds cliche, but slowing down to speed up, that's literally what you're doing.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, John. Any other questions for John while we've got him?
My room's far less interesting, so I won't be upset if nobody has any.
I'm just going to give a special shout out while we wait for any questions to come in to Sean, who I can see is cycling home at the moment with his webcam on whilst listening to the.
What an absolute animal.
Ian has asked, what's your favorite Lego set?
Mine? Good question. I had this boat that I got when I was about 7 or 8 with a fully rigid hull that floated in the bath. That was quite exciting. It was a police boat from the Lego City. Probably worth a few quid, that one now.
I'm going to have to do a Lego themed meetup at some point.
There you go.
Anyone else got any questions whilst we've got John here before we let him get off for the evening? No, thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate that you've taken some time putting this one together, because I know we discussed it probably about 7 or 8 months back now, and you've been juggling fatherhood in that time.
At least, mate. At least it almost didn't happen this evening. There was some disasters with some babies and some bodily fluids, but we got there. So.
Oh, brilliant. Adam has just asked, how much do you attribute the smaller damage to your approach versus better dev practices?
Let me reread that. How much do you attribute the smaller damage to your approach? Sorry, Adam, can you rephrase that for me?
Adam, I'll unmute you so you can ask the question.
That'd be a lot easier. What I meant to say was you learnt your lessons, and every time you had an accident, not to use possible child, future baby vernacular, the damage or the impact got smaller over the years. I was wondering if you were also observing what was occurring with, what you were learning versus development standards. So, a potentially annoying or damaging change being caught earlier, doing less damage because of other systems that were in place, as better regression testing, better peer reviews or whatever, just what your observations were.
No, 100%. I don't think I've maybe given that enough credence. You are right. It's not something I've really given any consideration to. I can't take ownership for, I've just become a better engineer. I'm probably a little bit of a better engineer, but there's a lot more sort of safety in place. And
I didn't mean to imply that you've not actually grown.
No.
Just like you were 10 years ago.
There's probably a lot of truth in that, though. I guess you start to see the benefits of test automation, of decent code reviews, of code reviews being smaller, for example. So I can review a 2-line, a 50-line 2-file change, but I can't easily review 2,000 lines over 67 files or something. So you start to be able to have conversations, I guess, around, better working practices and better systems, and being prepared to sort of dig your heels in and make sure that, as a step 0, we're going to put these things in place, or at least going to have a conversation about whether or not we think there's any value in them, rather than just accepting that, well, I've been told to deliver this feature, so I'm going to deliver this feature. And certainly the older, more convoluted code bases are far more likely to break. That's just invariably, there's so much more complexity, and I'm sure there's someone far smarter than me's come up with an elegant way of saying that, the more complexity there is, the more likely it is to break at some point. But that is completely true in my experience.
While I'm unmuted, I'm going to shamelessly ask another question. So when I was listening to your breakages and what the impact of that, not necessarily impact, what the impact on you was every time it happened, I was thinking you're possibly quite lucky, because you ended up working for places that weren't, you had the right culture in place, or a lack of blame, or just the desire to get things working again. Maybe a bit red-faced, like you say, but no fundamental challenges, no irrational people. Have you ever obviously there's probably a lot on that list that isn't on the list, so it's have you ever encountered the challenging culture where actually, although you fessed up to it and you owned a mistake, or maybe I'm not meant to imply that you're making mistakes all the time, the company wasn't as rational about it?
Not so much. I think engineers are quite pragmatic. There might be people sort of screaming at my engineering manager, like, what the hell's gone wrong here? Why is this broken? But as you say, I've always been lucky to work in teams where I've been sort of sheltered from that fallout, or if not sheltered, at least not in the office that particular day.
Good strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
Holiday.
Just be far away. I have had experience working. I ran a little agency for a time with some subcontracted devs working for me, and not so much like, oh, I've done something wrong, it's broken, and now we're going to have a huge argument about it, but just being on the receiving end of clients who are not happy and prepared to let you know about it. But as I say, not so much from breakages, but just I guess, yeah, lucky in that respect, because it's not to say it's common in tech. You can meet some fairly shady characters in tech as well. But I think for the most part, we are quite lucky in many respects, and definitely working with other engineers tend not to be, too highly strung. We can be a bit weird or a bit nerdy at times, but ultimately my experience of working with engineers has been great. Everyone just wants to do a good job, wants to build quality product, wants to sort of, keep things moving, keep the wheels on, rather than, point the finger too much. But that's, as you say, yeah, I've probably been lucky in that respect.
Brilliant. Cheers. Christian has asked, did or do you feel more pressure to deliver features as a contractor? And so could that have led you to trying to move faster?
See, I think this is a really interesting question. It's, my entire development career, practically, I've worked as a contractor, and you're literally just an extra pair of hands very often. You're not treated with any sort of reverence, or at least in my experience, I guess it would depend on the project. And certainly my own sort of experiences have always encouraged me to try and, I want to work with people smarter than I am, so I can learn from them. So I've never sort of shied away from taking something that felt a little bit out of my depth, and then being the sort of, viewed as maybe the weak link in the chain on the team, which it's been good, because then it's like that's not translated into pressure to sort of deliver. I do know that in agencies, let's say, smaller companies, if you go in as a contractor, your day rate will reflect more heavily on their balance sheet than at booking.com, let's say, or Money Supermarket, where they might have 50, 60 contractors on the books anyway. So I don't think there's necessarily there's not necessarily any pressure to sort of move at more speed, but there might be an expectation that you're probably going to be a bit more professional, or you're probably, that's unfair, probably going to turn up on time, leave on time, take exactly what's expected of you at lunch, etc., rather than taking too many liberties. But yeah, certainly, I've never felt any pressure to move at speed as a result of being a contractor. And there's always been sort of other contractors on the team to sort of use as a reference point. Again, I've just viewed it as I'm a member of this team, rather than I'm a contractor and therefore, more skilled or more experienced or anything like that, because very often that's absolutely not the case. And particularly with regards to a particular project, the people who've been working on that project will have far more domain experience and domain knowledge than you will. So you just have to be patient and ride that wave of discomfort when you join a new project and you don't know anything.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, John. Anyone else got any last questions, or am I clear to wrap this up for the evening? I'll give you one last chance. We will do one more giveaway before we go. But I'll keep you until I open my random number generator to get a question in. No, it's looking like we're going to wrap that up there, John. Thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it. I know you've been involved in working really hard on this talk, and time has been a massive pressure on yourself. So thank you very much for taking the time this evening. Do go and check out John's podcast if you can. It is very interesting, and can go from there. With those of you that have are remaining for the evening, we've got number 27 on our random number generator. I'm still trying to get that in focus. Just going down there. That's Marta, I apologize. I believe it's Majewska, but I don't want to offend you if I mispronounce your last name. Marta, I will send you a quick message now with regards to how to claim your prize. But for those of you who've been here this evening, thank you very much for joining us. As always, we will be sticking around for social chat. Feel free to stick around, have a natter for a little while. I'll cut off the recording now. I don't want to end the meeting for everyone. That's not the right button. Stop.